I did a play called A, E-H, question mark, off-Broadway. And right after it, I got very good reviews. And I was, I was like an unknown in New York. I'd been in New York 10 years. It's like a breakthrough part for me. And I picked up the Sunday Times one morning, and my face was plastered all over the front of the Arts and Leisure section, still from the play A. And Walter Kerr, who was the most esteemed drama critic of the day, had written an article comparing my performance to Buster Keaton. I had never seen a Buster Keaton movie. And I guess Nichols, unbeknownst to me, had been trying to cast that movie, not just the part of Benjamin, but also the part that, Elaine, the part that Catherine played, I think for a couple of years. And because the movie was made in 1967, and I think the book was written in about 62. So I think they had gone through so many drafts, and I mean, it'd been a period of years, and then finally a draft that they wanted to shoot, and then they couldn't cast it right. I had just gotten an agent after being in New York almost 10 years, Jane Oliver. And while I was doing A, she said, there's this Mike Nichols movie that they've been trying to cast. And I just immediately said, great, so what? Because I'm not going to have a chance. And I had heard that they had tested everybody. This was like, and I still believe today that Catherine Ross and I, it was like the bottom of the barrel. So, had we tested earlier, we would not have gotten the role. We had tested a year earlier. The next thing I heard was my agent says to me, you have to sign a contract before you do the test. I said, what do you mean? All these actors have tested over the months or years or whatever it is, have signed contracts, and they do it. They did it then, and I think they might do it today. So it's an option contract. If they don't pick you, the contract is void. If they do pick you, you owe them 6 pictures at a certain amount of money, which escalates. 3 pictures, or 2 pictures were to go to Nichols, 2 pictures were to go to Larry Terman, the producer, 2 pictures were to go to Joe Levine, the distributor. And I remember saying to my agent, fuck it. Later, friends told me that was one of the shrewdest business decisions I ever made, but I knew nothing about business, and I wasn't making it for that reason. I was rather stubborn even in those days, and I did not want to be forced. The thought of being forced to do a part that I didn't want to do was abhorrent to me. And the thought that I would have to make a movie, and then after that, these people could submit, could force me to do 6 movies was just, crazy. Now I go to the screen test for The Graduate. I fly out there. They give me 3 days off from the play. My understudy takes over. And I fly out. And I remember they sent me that script. I only had about 2-3 days to memorize it. I'm a very slow memorizer. I did very badly in school. 10 pages is a lot. And I couldn't sleep. I was so nervous. The night before I flew, because I hadn't memorized it, I stayed up all night, keep trying to memorize. I tried to memorize on the airplane. I land in Los Angeles. So here I am for the first time in a movie studio. I mean, it was Paramount, I can't remember. And I walk into this palatial office, high ceilings, lots of like rooms connecting to rooms, and I see Nichols, I recognize him, against a bar. It's like out of a movie set. And there's glasses and everything. He would, hi, would you like a drink? He's always so casual. And he comes over to me and shakes hands, and I'm immediately feeling miserable. I just have bad feelings about the whole thing. This is not the part for me. I'm not supposed to be in movies. I'm supposed to be where I belong. An ethnic actor is supposed to be in ethnic New York in an ethnic off-Broadway show, and I know my place. And we start talking, and I can read him. I feel I can read him, like he feels he's made a big mistake. Next thing I know, there's Catherine Ross. Now he brings in Catherine Ross, and she's really beautiful, and that throws me. Because immediately the idea of, I never thought of it, but, suddenly who I would be reading with. But and then Anne Bancroft left, and the idea of that the director was connecting me with someone as beautiful as her, it became an even uglier joke. It was like a Jewish nightmare. Anyway, I'm sitting here, she's sitting there, Nichols is sitting there, and pretty soon he's not looking at me at all. And he had never met her before. And he starts talking to her, and I can feel it slowly. I'm going into the wall. And he's just zeroing in and zeroing in and zeroing in on Catherine Ross. And I'm saying to myself, I get it. He's got the hots for her. And I'm just here to screen test with someone that he really has a crush on. And he's saying things to her, you really remind me of my first wife. I can't tell you how much you remind me of my... And I mean, it looks like flirtation to me, I couldn't blame him. But I felt, I'm a cipher. I remember the next day before the screen test, I'd love to shoot it someday. I'd love to, if I ever did an autobiography. It was surrealistic. It's surrealistic in my memory. It was, I show up at the studio, and I didn't know anything about studios, and they take me into this makeup department. And it's a rather large makeup department. It's a long room with lots of chairs. It's like the old Hollywood. I mean, today we get made up in campers, trailers. In those days, it was still the remnants of the studio. And these things were, these chairs were upholstered and everything. It was like, who knew who had sat in those chairs and been made, the Joan Crawfords and the Betty. I mean, it reeked of that kind of, And people are there, it's like an operating room. And there's whoever, I remember the Westmores, what are legendary names. And they asked me to take a seat. And apparently Nichols had talked to them, he's not there, and I take a seat, and they start working on me. And I think they worked on me for over 2 hours. And I'm not getting any prosthetics on, They're not putting a toupee on. They're just trying to do something with whatever is there. And then Nichols comes in, and he looks. And I remember him saying something, he was very nice, but I remember him saying something like, but his ambivalence was clearly showing through. He says, can't you do something about his eyebrows? I know Bobby Duvall, who I used to live with. I don't have it so much now, because as you get older, one of the things you lose is your eyebrows. But he used to kid me, say, I had one eyebrow. So they plucked me. I'd never been plucked before. I didn't like being plucked very much. But they plucked my eyebrows. He says, now what are we going to do with his nose? Nichols talks like this. What are we going to do with his nose? And they started shading it or whatever and trying. I says, and his neck is too thick. My neck is like 16.5 inches. So they put a turtleneck on me. They tried to slim it down. They did something with my hair. And it was maybe one of the most demeaning experiences I've ever had, and it was not intentional on their part. We start doing the scene. I go up on my lines. Catherine goes up on her lines. We start getting it right, but we're very tense. It's no good. He yells, cut, cut, cut. I remember at one point I pinched very gently Catherine's, probably her right buttocks, as a way to help loosen us up. Kind of patted her and gave her a little, and she turned on me. And we later became friends, but at that moment she just whirled on me and said, don't you ever do that to me again. And suddenly everybody kind of heard it, and the crew and whatever, and I just sat there and they didn't know what was going on. She said, how dare you? I said, sorry. She said, I was just trying to get us relaxed. Sorry. And then if it was bad up to then, it was going to get worse after that. She later apologized. She said it was her own tension too. So we start again. Cut, cut. I mean, we're shooting from 10 in the morning. As I remember, they don't even break for lunch, and this is going on for hours. It's a torture. Went back, somehow finished the scene. Somehow we did. They printed a couple of takes. There wasn't one that was any good. And I went around shaking. I was so relieved when the day was over. They said, that's it, or whatever. And I went around shaking the hands in this room with the crew. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And apparently when I started going from one person to another, I had my hand in my pocket, hands in my pocket. I forgot to thank the prop guy. So I took my hand out of my pocket. I think I may have had my own raincoat on. I was going back. I couldn't wait to go back to New York. And when I took my hand out to shake his hands, subway tokens came out of my pocket. And they weren't big in those days, they were about that size. About 8 or 10 of them, you know. And they all spilled out. And they, you know, people, an LA crew, they don't know what a subway token is, a New York subway token. And he says, "No, I'll help you with that." As I started to bend over and pick them up. And he picked them up for me. And he gave them to me. And I remember what he said. He said, "Here, kid, you're going to need these." She was very excited, my agent. It was like it was good news or something. You know, he wants you to call, wants you to call. I don't know, I'm not sure. You know, I mean, why would a director, if they were going to say no, you know, you didn't get the part, they wouldn't say, call the director tomorrow at such and such an hour. The appointed time came, because we had to wait until noon. It was like noon or something, because it's 3 hours earlier in LA. And I called him, I guess it was his home number. And I think I woke him up. And I thought, oh, shit. You know, actors always think things like that, you know, because subliminal, you know, subconsciously. He would have said, "You got the part," but when you woke him up, he said, "You didn't." You know? We always think in those terms. So anyway, I woke him, and I could tell, I said, "Oh, I'm sorry I woke you." He said, "No, that's all right. It's all right." And there was this pause. And I didn't know what to say. I said, "You told me to call you?" He says, "Yeah." And then a long, long pause. So I almost thought we were disconnected. And I hear the magic words, which were, "Well, you got it." Those 4 words. Well, you got it. First week of rehearsal, he knew the right questions. He said, "Did you have any idols when you were growing up? Who were your idols? Did you, any movie stars, anybody you..." I said, "My brother, my big brother." It was just the 2 of us. My brother, Ronnie, so almost 7 years older than me. He asked me one time, he says, "Does your brother ever get uptight?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, what happens to him when Ronnie gets uptight?" And I could imitate my brother pretty good. You can always imitate the person you worship if you can imitate anybody. And I said, "Well, he holds his breath when he's really upset. And he doesn't breathe. He stops breathing." That's how I used to always know he was pissed off at me when we were kids. And then little spurts of air would come out. And he said, "Well, now let's do the scene like that." Just come out through his nostrils, they would flare. And I did the scene like that. And Bancroft was wonderful, because she would, you know, she wanted to create her own thing, but she's sitting, she's waiting, because he's focusing on me, though. Try doing it again now. I did it uptight, my brother uptight. Let's do that scene again. I think it was the thing at the table before we get the room in the hotel. And I don't want to go through with it or something. He says, "Try doing it again and just forget about your brother now. Just let whatever remnants of," I know this is kind of technical now, you know, but just let the essence of it remain. And I did it. I mean, I sat there with her at the table. "Well, Mrs. Robinson, I really don't want, I'm still trying to be him, but I'm not trying to be him, I'm just retaining the essence." And suddenly, came out instead of, it was born. And I wasn't that aware I had done it. But he broke into hysterical laughter. And he has a great laugh, Nichols. He's crying, because she kept going. I kept going, because I was just holding my breath the way my brother did. Well, in the final product in the film, he lays in those a few more places. That's his directorial flourish. And then another example would be that when she's sitting on the bed and she takes, in the hotel room, and she takes her blouse off and she has her bra on, I'm supposed to start to remove her bra or something. And we're trying to work on this. Now, no director works like this. Directors just say, okay, do it, and they go for some schlocky, comedic thing. I mean, that's something, you know, that's derivative of something you've seen 50, you know. Very few directors are going for that thing, or how to arrive at it. He said, can you tell me about, we'd sit down again, and Bancroft would take a walk. Can you tell me about the first time you ever got laid? I told him. Can you tell me about the first time you ever touched a girl? And suddenly this memory comes back to me. And I was kind of sexually obsessed. Always had been, even before you're supposed to be. And I heard about, and I was telling him all this, and heard about stories about what you do. Some kids said, in the ninth graders would tell you when you're in the 7th grade, if you want to get a feel, you have to, as a girl's coming down the stairs, you look for a 9th grader because they have the most developed breasts usually. This was what guy talk, see? And as the girl's coming down the stairs, you pretend like you're putting on your jacket as you're going up the stairs, and it just happens to grab, you know. I mean, this, you know. And I failed at it. I missed a girl, and she knew what I was doing. She just turned around and started laughing at me, I remember. I went, oh, and just grabbed her face or something, you know. He says, let's try that. He didn't tell Anne Bancroft. So we're doing the scene. It's in the movie. And suddenly, right, and she takes her shirt off, and I just come over, and he says, try to recreate that scene. And I come around and back. She didn't know what I was going to do. She had no idea. We're just rehearsing. I come from up behind. Suddenly this hand comes from behind her. This is the great seduction. I just stand there holding it. Not even, because my mind was I didn't even move my hand. And my hand goes there, and she was shocked. And Bancroft just shocked. And she just went like this. Nichols started laughing. Again. Well, I didn't want to break the scene. You're not supposed to break the scene just good. But I started laughing. The whole thing was suddenly, and we're in the middle of the scene, and I just started breaking up. And I did what any actor would do. That's on, because when you're acting, and you might as well be on the stage. Is I turned away and walked over to the wall and stood against the wall until I stopped breaking up. And I couldn't stop breaking up, so I started banging my head against the wall just like this. I was laughing so hard. Just during this rehearsal, and I was just going like this. I was just going like this, trying to stop laughing. And Nichols doesn't know that's why I'm doing it. He still thinks it's part of the scene, and he is in hysterics by now. He gets it as the character. It's in the movie. When we were shooting in Laverne, California, there's the point where I'm upstairs yelling, Elaine, 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 on the glass, trying to stop the wedding. The reverend or priest, I can't remember whom, had agreed to lease out his church to the movie crew and had never done it before, and somehow was misinformed the way they're always misinformed. It'll just be a couple of days, we'll clean up everything. They have no idea that it's the Gulf War that they're allowing into their premises. And the cables and the cameras and 150 people, and it goes over, and the Knicks in his beautiful church and whatever, and the man is walking around like a cliche. You know, oh my God. You know, everyone would look at him from day to day, and he'd be shaking his head because this beautiful edifice of his was being slowly just chewed up. So we finally get, after a few days, up to this thing where I have to run down the street and run up the stairs over and over again. And now we finished that part. Now we're going to start pounding on the glass. You know, and there's this huge glass. We're on location. You're ahead of me. You got it. And you understand where I'm going. And he says, don't, that's a gift, that big plate glass. He'll break, because I start rehearsing. I start pounding on it, you know, and I'm always afraid that if I have to give Nichols what he wants. Elaine, Elaine. And the glass is shaking. You know, you can feel it. He says, please stop. He starts screaming. And we all stop and look at him. He says, that's it. That's it. Leave. Everyone leave. The movie's over. Get out. What's the matter? No, that's a gift. We'll replace. I don't care if you replace it. It's a gift. I don't want it broken. Very pregnant silence. Nichols comes over to me. Is there any way you can knock on the glass so it doesn't break or so it doesn't shake or anything like that? I says, I don't know. What am I supposed to do? So some guy, you know, everything becomes a big deal in movies. Everyone's, you know, you have to get the experts. Somehow somebody, head of props, comes over and says, I think if you spread your arms and you just tap like that it won't, you know, it's the pounding. I said, so you want me to stand here? I've just run miles. I run up the stairs. I'm screaming. I'm half out of my mind. And when I get to this window, I spread my arms and I go. And the priest reverend saying, yes, yes, that's all he can do, or you will all leave. And Nichols says, I'm trying to make it work. And I do it, and I start doing it like that. And that's what's in the movie. And every piece of film criticism that I've ever read is Nichols has Benjamin in a Christ-like position, and this was somehow a Jesus thing, and that's why his arms are outstretched. Nichols and I talked recently about a sequel, because I had a great idea for a sequel, and he liked it. I thought I should still be married to Catherine, and that Anne Bancroft would come over for dinner, and once or twice a week, and you know, she was friends with the family still. I thought we should not have a particularly good marriage by this point, that we could have growing kids, but have one kid who still was an accident maybe, that's 16 or 17. Let's say a boy who has a girlfriend. And I start having an affair with my son's girlfriend. And Nichols smiled. He says, I get it, you become Mrs. Robinson. I says, that's right. And he smiled and he says, and I know what you should be doing for a living. I said, what? He said, you should be directing TV commercials. And we started to enjoy, and I think it's still in the air.